Hi everyone, it's your host, Kaum. On this episode of KaumConnections, I interview one of my best friends, Michael Beals, and we talk about gratitude. I've known Beals since grade 2, and he is someone who I think has a real grasp on the concept of gratitude. He talks throughout the piece about what gratitude means to him, the impact it has on his life and his ideas, how to use gratitude, and of course, we talk about how gratitude relates to connection. Beals mentions two important figures who he has learned from about gratitude. First is Viktor Frankl, and his book, Man's Search for Meaning, is something that has inspired Beals. The second is the inspirational Marine veteran, Jacob Schick. I'll put information about both of these inspiring individuals on the information section of this episode. My friend Beals is someone who really utilizes gratitude in his real life, and the section where he talks about using gratitude as a tool to cope with pain is particularly interesting. Without further ado, here's Michael Beals on KaumConnections. I'm your host, Kaum. I hope you enjoy listening. Thanks. Hi everyone, welcome to KaumConnections. It's your host, Kaum. Today's date is January 2nd, 2019, and I have a very special guest here with me today, my friend Beals. Hi Beals.
Hello.
So today we're going to be talking about gratitude, and as always, we're going to be talking about connection as well. So Beals, how do you define gratitude?
Gratitude is the feeling that allows you to live a life that you'd be okay with dying at any moment. Gratitude is an idea and it's a state of mind that makes you realize in the present what you value and really what's important in life.
So what things can you be grateful for?
It can be people in your life, it can be places you've been to, it can be your state of being in that day. I was talking to a friend 2 days ago and she was saying how she was so grateful for 4 types of almond milk that she has. You can really be grateful for anything because it's not about the physical object, it's about the state of being in your mind.
So you'd say that gratitude is something that is intrinsic and affects your state of being instead of something extrinsic that, are you saying that you can be grateful for anything because it comes from within instead of something that is given to you and you're grateful for it because of its properties?
100%. You can absolutely be grateful for a gift, but everything about the feeling is inside of you, because what's in reality is there's a gift in your hand and there's you, but you can't see the emotion or any of that. That's everything that you're creating inside of your head. Gratitude is something that you create inside of you, but when you practice it, it radiates to the people around you without anything physical. It's a connection that you can create with people.
That's really cool. It's another conduit to connection, as I always say. That's awesome. So, how does gratitude impact your life?
How does gratitude impact my life? Well, to put it frankly, it helps me not be a little bitch. Because I feel like at this stage in life, there's so many things, especially in university, there's a lot of little things that people complain about. And when you're around those people and you're around that complaining day in and day out, it's so easy to get caught up in it and get into the state of negativity of I have so many classes, or I have this, or I have these family problems and that. And yeah, if you want to be in that state, by all means go for it. I'm not telling you how to act. I'm just saying that that's one state of being that you can be in. And a completely different one is gratitude. Personally, in my life, I typically take things to the extreme, in which sense that I apply values from extreme situations into my own life, because those ideas can extend just beyond the extremities from which they were born. The biggest example of this, which connects to gratitude for me, relates back to a book, and it's A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. In this book, to summarize it, but I can give you a summary, but I can't give you the sensation of reading the book. But it's essentially about Viktor Frankl's life, who was an Austrian psychotherapist during World War II that was captured by the Nazis because of his Jewish ancestry. imprisoned in multiple concentration camps. His whole family died, and he was put through unbelievably brutal circumstances. And when you read about it, you think, I can't even imagine that a human is able to live through this. But he talks about it, and he made it through, and he talks about his life afterwards, becoming like a very successful psychotherapist and creating the third school of Austrian psychotherapy, which he calls logotherapy. But the most important lesson that I took from it was that he who has a why to live for can bear with almost anyhow. And how that relates to the book is that when he's talking about himself and his inmates and seeing them perish one by one throughout his time there, he talks about it not as a physical battle, but it's a mental battle within oneself. And those who lose a mental battle are the ones who die. Yes, there's some that die by a bullet, and you can't, like, they couldn't change their circumstance or their tragic ending. But a lot of them died because they chose to accept death and not keep fighting. And that could come through the feeling of starvation, the feeling of hopelessness, especially. And he said the people who did survive are the ones who could still see that little light at the end of the tunnel. Those who had something to look forward to, and that gave them gratitude, that gave them joy and happiness. And that's how he lived through it, through his mind. The thing that kept him going was the idea of seeing his wife again. Like, oh, how amazing it'll be to see her after the war. Tragically, his wife didn't make it through the concentration camps, and he only found this out afterwards. But it was that idea that kept him grateful that, man, if I can make it through this, I can see my wife. It gave him hope. And even when he realized his wife died, he still carried on his life. He still became an incredible psychotherapist because he found reasons to be thankful to be alive. Through his book, it's a very extreme circumstance that he talks about. But the idea that he pulls from it can be used in any circumstance. That if you have a why to live for, you can put up with any shit. If you have a goal in mind, you can put up with any shit. And the challenges that you go through to get to that goal, those aren't things that you should loathe. Those are things that you should embrace. It's like, oh, I have to do this in order to get there. Well, when I get through this, I'm going to be so much stronger. And you take that path and you keep jumping those obstacles. And when you look back, the gratitude that, wow, because I went through all those challenges and I suffered and I bled and I sweat and I cried, I've become a stronger version of myself, the version that I need to be in order to reach that goal. And when you can tackle life with embracing challenges and being grateful for the pain that you're exposed to, whether that's external or the pain that you subject yourself to, your whole worldview changes and you can put up with anything that gets presented to you in life. Because you can never control the external factors. Well, let's not use extremities. There are some things in your external factors you can control, but there will inevitably be factors in your life that are out of your hands. But the one thing that people can never take from you is your ability to choose your attitude. You choose your attitude, anything can become a fun challenge, or anything can become the greatest suffering you've ever felt in your life. It's your choice to decide how you want to approach it.
You talked about pain and how you perceive pain.
Mm-hmm.
How can you use gratefulness to change your outlook on pain? How can you use gratefulness and gratitude as a tool?
There's definitely a lot of different types of pain you could go through. We could start with the most tangible, like physical pain. Let's say you break your leg, okay? And it puts you out of commission for a lot of things you wanted to do. Well, one obvious attitude they can take is frustration. Now I'm inhibited from doing all this. And you're turning the cogs in your mind that focus on that negativity. That, oh, I'm inhibited, I can't do this, I'm handicapped, things like that. Any sort of thoughts like that, by all means, you can go through that, but I'm guessing that you're going to put yourself in a pretty shitty state of mind and it's not going to be a very fun time. Or you say, well, this is a circumstance, but I still have my ability to choose my attitude. And if I still want to live a life that I'm happy with dying at any moment, I'm probably not gonna choose a path that I'm gonna be upset and angry. I'm gonna choose a path that, well, either I take on the challenge of still trying to do these activities, or I accept that right now I can't do that, but this is opening up other avenues to explore new things in life. Personal example for me was in grade 10 that I really wanted to try out for the rugby team. And I was the scrawniest little guy on the team, I swear to God. I weighed probably like 110 or 120 pounds, like twigs of a body, but I had this ambition because I wanted to be like my brother. And did the tryouts, and I made the rugby 7 team, which it kind of formed from like the kids who weren't as big to do rugby 15s. So like, all right, so to make sure they don't die, let's have them do rugby 7s, which is more like running. So I was so pumped, and I did that, and we were training, and I was so pumped in training. And we start the first game. The first game is a tough one, and we're against like one of the top teams in the league. And about halfway through the game, because the game's 14 minutes, and just after halftime, so 7 minutes in, the other team fumbles the ball, and I get on a breakaway. And I'm like, oh, this is my shot. This is my chance to prove who I am. And I'm running for the end zone. And the other team, they have this guy, I swear to God, not like 4 feet tall, but hella fast legs. And just before the end zone, he gets on me, wraps his arms around my waist, and I go down. And I don't really remember much. I just remember falling and then getting up. I'm like, oh shit, something doesn't feel right in my body. And I go to the stands, and I tell my coach, like, coach, I don't feel so good. He's like, you probably I think you sprained your shoulder. Like, just go to the hospital and check it out. Ended up completely fracturing my collarbone, like clean break, no connection. I was like, well, one, clearly my coach doesn't know anything about medicine, and two, that pretty much puts me out of commission for the whole season. And well, definitely at the start, I was really upset. I was like, did all this, I had all this ambition, I went to all the tryouts, and there's my rugby career for this season. 7 minutes and a couple seconds, but I can say I'm undefeated. But anyways, that happened. And the first few days I was feeling pretty upset that, well, it was my writing arm too. So couldn't write, couldn't do really physical activity. Pretty much everything I did in my life at that time. Couldn't play drums. So I was like, well, that pretty much limits me from everything I like to do. So just I decided like to look for, well, what can I do with a broken right arm? And at that time I had a math teacher I really liked, and I was kind of curious about learning some stuff of math, and so I just like talked to my gym teacher. I'm like, listen, I'm literally just going to sit on the bench if I go to gym class, so can I just hang out with this teacher? And she's like, yeah, sure. So I ended up spending the whole term with him, just having philosophical conversations and like exploring math topics I would never do in class. And it just completely changed my whole perspective on this broken collarbone, that yeah, I couldn't do sports, I couldn't play drums, I couldn't really write, but none of that inhibited my mind. I could still have talks, I could still be challenged mentally, and that's what it really turned into, was opening my mind to new ways of thinking, not just mathematically, but philosophically. And I wouldn't have had that experience had I not broken my collarbone, because I wouldn't have had all that free time on my hands. For me, it's just about changing your perspective on your situation. That you're going to be presented with pain, and that pain might physically inhibit you from doing your things, or it might not. But either way, you can always explore different avenues to grow yourself in ways that you hadn't grown before. When it comes to mental or emotional pain, these ones are a little more difficult for me to talk to because I can't say that I've experienced depression or have experienced any very severe mental states. But what I would go back to in that case is Viktor Frankl and his book, and also there's countless stories and tales that I've read of military soldiers with brutal stories from war, or even the PTSD that they suffer from after the war. And there's so many tragic stories of suicides and just self-harm that comes from the PTSD, that people who don't sort of attack that problem and it persists in their life until it gets extreme. But there's some that I read about, and I am just absolutely amazed that they were able to turn their life around like that.
Hey, Beals remembered the name of the person he's going to talk about soon at a later date, and he told me. So his name is Jacob Schick. I put the link to his story in the description. Thanks.
There's one, I can't remember his name right now. If I do, I'll say it, but he was a soldier in Iraq, I think 2003, and he was driving a Humvee, and the Humvee went over a landmine and blew the Humvee apart, blew his legs off. His comrades really thought he was going to die there on the spot. He was bleeding profusely from both openings, and took him to the hospital, put him on painkillers and painkillers and painkillers, and it was a struggle, and eventually got him back to the States. And I think he went through the next 3 years of just intense surgery and being constantly on opioids. Like without it, he couldn't handle the pain. And just to think that he went from a state of being a strong, physically fit, mentally capable soldier to being drugged up for 2 or 3 years. You can't think, you can't do anything. He was talking about he suffered depression, he suffered PTSD from his events, and just the worst state of mind. And there's so many times he contemplated suicide, that he saw no purpose in living. And I can't remember exactly what was it that changed his mind, but he spun his life around. And now, like after all those events, he's a paraplegic, and he's a motivational speaker, and he talks about his time in the war, but more about his time in the hospital and going through that suffering and that depression, the suicidal tendencies, to making it through that and seeing that, well, if other US soldiers can do this, like he thought he was bad, and then he'd see other wounded veterans, and they had no chance of living. They were there in the hospital just waiting to die. And there was one guy he saw, and he was still making jokes, he was still laughing. He had no chance. He lost his 4 limbs. They were just holding on to like life support at that point, but he was still laughing. He was still making jokes. When you just think that, if you just put your life on hold and you think about the suffering that people have gone through, and from that suffering, a lot of people die, and they succumb to the pain and the depression, and they let it take them full. But then there's those stories of those few people that just keep kicking, whether that's through fighting, whether that's through humor. They want to live. And you see that and you realize no matter what you're going through, no one can change your attitude. No one can pick your attitude. You pick that yourself. And if you pick an attitude of gratitude, that, wow, even though all this terrible shit is going on in my life, I still have this. I still have maybe my family, or I still have my body, I still have my happiness, or I still have a bed. Like, if you can just focus on the little things that are really like luxuries or gifts that we have in our life, you can change your whole attitude.
Thank you, Beals. Last question. How does connection tie in with gratitude? What kind of links do you see between the two of them?
Connection and gratitude. What kind of connection?
I think you told me about this way back when, but you told me about the different kind of connections there are. So connection to the family, connection to friends, connection to the self, and then connection to the public. And so how does connection tie in with gratitude in those aspects?
Well, if connection is such an important thing, and you want to know the connection between gratitude and connection, I'm going to first ask you, what's the purpose of connection?
Purpose of connection. Good question. I'd say the purpose of connection is cyclical in nature. The purpose of connection is to be connected.
I don't think you can have meaningful connection without gratitude. And that if you want to fully appreciate the person that you have a connection with, how can you appreciate without being grateful for their qualities? But if there's a quality you appreciate about your friend, about your family, about your significant other, how do you express that appreciation without gratitude? Is gratitude not the necessary communication tool in order to express that? I really don't see any way that you can be thankful for someone in your life or appreciate someone's value and presence in your life without gratitude. I feel that you can have different levels of gratitude for sure, that you can have a relationship with someone and have a lot of gratitude and it's very strong, or you can have very little gratitude. And how much gratitude is the right amount? I don't think there's a number or anything. I think it's something that you decide with that person. Some people prefer a lot of appreciation and other people would rather have that seldom, because having it rare gives it more value every time. And that just depends on the person that you have that connection with. But I think it's a quintessential aspect of having any connection with someone that you appreciate.
Thank you, Beals. Very thoughtful answer. I just wanted to say thank you for coming on the show and for sharing your thoughts with me and with the audience. I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts and ideas with me. Thank you.
One more thing.
Yeah.
To everyone out there, don't be happy, be grateful. Because if you live a life that you always want to be happy, you're going to find situations where happiness doesn't work. You can't walk into a funeral and be happy. You can't have someone die on you. You can't have any sort of extreme circumstance and think happiness is going to be the appropriate action. But there's no situation I found where gratitude would not be effective. Because with gratitude, you can still feel happy as a byproduct, or you can be in tears as a byproduct. But it's that state of being thankful that's going to help you appreciate what you had and move on.
It's a very beautiful thing to say, I think. So thank you for sharing that with all of us. Yeah.
By all means, challenge it if you choose.
All right, Beals, thank you so much for coming on the show. I had a lot of fun. Hope you did too. Thanks, Beals. Bye-bye.
Hi everyone, it's your host Kaum again. I want to thank Beals for sharing his insights on gratitude, and I want to thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of KaumConnections. It's your host Kaum signing off. Thanks again for listening. Bye-bye.